This is from over on our Reddit subsection. And RF Hartwell shares this over on the Reddit. Thank you for sharing that, which, by the way, our Reddit subsection is just reddit.com/r/GetYourNewsOnWithRon. You can drop articles there for me, or you can tweet them at me at Ron Placone. That's how I build the show. And RF Hartwell dropped this in the Reddit subsection. And we've been talking a long time about the Bernie Blackout, which is very real. They leave Bernie off of polls, or they pick and choose which polls they decide to highlight or not. And the they I'm referring to is the corporate media. The corporate media really does not want Bernie to win. They really don't want him to get out of the primary. When a candidate like Bernie Sanders makes it this far, it's by mistake. Bernie himself has said things similar to that, and it's true, and he's right. They don't want a Bernie Sanders to get this far. Bernie Sanders, who of course is not perfect, but nonetheless is an outsider, nonetheless has plans and policy ideas that disrupt the apple cart. They disrupt the status quo, and they would make all of our lives better. He has a plan to forgive student loan debt. He has a plan to make college tuition free. He has a plan to give everyone health care, and they're real plans, not copied plans that they don't actually plan on following through with, like Elizabeth Warren. He actually wants to follow through on these plans. And if he is elected president, he will need to govern like an FDR did, where he goes to the people and says, this is what I want to do. This is who's stopping it. Get out there. Show up in the streets. That's what needs to happen. So the corporate media really doesn't want this guy to win because he disrupts the apple cart. He disrupts the status quo, and their advertisers are not happy with this. A Medicare for all single-payer system would disrupt Big Pharma. It would make their model go away. Who advertises on the corporate media all the time? Big Pharma. His Green New Deal would disrupt the oil and gas companies. Who advertises on the corporate media? Oil and gas companies. And why do they do that? They do that for favorable coverage. Gas companies don't need to advertise. There is not one car owner on this planet who doesn't know that if they don't put gasoline in their car, it doesn't go vroom. Everybody knows that. So the oil and gas companies advertise for favorable coverage. So the corporate media doesn't want Bernie Sanders to go far. So they're fighting back the only way they can. They tried to smear him, didn't work. They tried to marginalize him, didn't work. They tried to trivialize him and his supporters, didn't work. Why? Because the numbers are out there. He has more small dollar donors than any other candidate. He has more grassroots support than any other candidate. He has more volunteers than any other candidate. And he's getting people standing up and applauding for him on Fox News town halls. He's connecting with people in the heartland on the idea of universal health care, despite the corporate media's best effort of trying to scare them off by calling it socialism. And Bernie Sanders is going, no. This isn't authoritarianism. This isn't authoritarian socialism. This is democratic socialism. These are just programs that make your life better. This is what Denmark has, what Sweden has, what Norway has, what England has, what Canada has, what every other industrialized country in the world has. Germany, France, Italy. So here's another piece of evidence about the Bernie Blackout. He's just erased PBS, public broadcasting. I thought they're supposed to be the good guys. Well, no, Koch money has infiltrated them too. PBS segment finds time for Klobuchar, Sestak, and Bollock, but completely ignores Bernie Sanders. A Monday night PBS NewsHour segment on the state of the 2020 Democratic presidential primary highlighted Amy Klobuchar, who's pulling at about 1 or 2%. She has a new ad campaign in Iowa. I'm sure that's gonna bring the numbers up, I bet you. The departure of marginal candidates Steve Bullock and Joe Sestak. I follow this election very closely. I have live tweeted every single debate that has happened. One of them, I even had to wake up early in Australia where the sun was shining and I was right near the beach. But Graham Elwood and myself still watched the debate, which was a shit show, as all of them have been. Live tweeted it and then streamed about it after and plowed through our shitty internet connection. I was not even aware that Steve Bullock was running for president, and I was barely aware. Joe Shestak, I remember hearing that name floated about, but I needed a reminder. And they are covering these people who are barely in the race. They didn't even buy their way in quite the way Tom Steyer did. They're covering these people, and they're ignoring the person with the most grassroots support, Bernie Sanders, Steve Bullock, and Joe Shestak. People out there in the chat, did you even realize these two people were running? Who didn't even realize these two people were running? And I'm sure a lot of it, Steve Bullock, I didn't know he was running. I did not know that guy was running. I barely know anything about that guy, and I did not know he was running. Barely know anything about him, did not know he was running. Joe Shestak, barely know anything about him. Had heard at one point months and months ago that he was running. I was like, oh yeah, that guy. I barely know anything about these two people. Barely know that they're running. Steve Bullock, I didn't know at all that this guy was running. I've watched every debate. Did not even know this guy was running. What else did PBS bother covering, though? A tender moment with Senator Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden's No Malarkey bus tour, which, by the way, no malarkey is a gateway drug to shitty politics. That's what no malarkey is. No, Joe Biden, his speech, he is so out of it at this point. Joe Biden is like if jet lag was a person. If you've ever been jet lagged, that is Joe Biden personified. He is jet lag personified. He is just half awake, talking about nothing. Talking about his hair, his leg hair when he sat as a lifeguard and enjoyed kids jumping on his lap. We could have a new game show. It could be called Shitty Beat Poetry or Joe Biden Speech. And I bet a lot of people would get it wrong. Like, oh, daddy-o. I was a lifeguard. The sun was shining. I had hair on my leg, man. And the leg hair was smooth. Like Frankie, baby. Yeah. Shitty beat poetry. Not good beat poetry, by the way. Not this in the beat generation. I like the beats a lot. There's some great beat poetry out there. But there was some shitty stuff, too. We're talking about the shitty stuff. That's because if it was good beat poetry, you would know that's not a Joe Biden speech. If I was reading How, you'd be like, that's not a Joe Biden speech. That's How. That's legendary. But if it's like some shitty stuff that everyone's forgotten, well, you know, you get the idea. So they did not once even mention Senator Bernie Sanders, despite recent key endorsements and a surge in the polls. Remember, I know this is a quote from current affairs editor Nathan Robertson. So supporters have dubbed this the Bernie Blackout. Here's a quote from Nathan Robertson, editor of Current Affairs. Remember that Sanders has been number one in two out of the three recent New Hampshire polls and is currently second in Iowa, ahead of quote unquote frontrunner Joe Biden. Joe Biden, by the way, is just coasting on what little name recognition he has left. I mean, the more, and that's what his campaign's counting on. They are making sure he talks as little as possible because they know he is incapable of raising his poll numbers. Name recognition is not going to be enough to coast you into the general and to get you through a primary. Why? Because too many people are paying attention this time. Name recognition alone ain't going to do it. And that's literally all Joe Biden has. I'm Obama's buddy. That's all he has. He has been pretty much on the wrong side of everything for 40 years. For 40 years, he has been on the wrong side of nearly everything. And whenever he talks, people like him less, and reasonably so. Reasonably so. Deservedly so. It's a better way, but reasonably. I don't know why I said reasonably there. Deservedly so. Every time he talks, I mean, he's just out of it. Like he's done. He is done. He is intellectually spent. When he was confronted about immigration by the Latino community, by a Latino activist, he said, you should just vote for Trump. He did not have an answer for him. He had nothing. So he just gave up. He's like, oh, go vote for Trump then. How inspiring is that? Hey, brown person, where else are you going to go? Where else are you going to go? I'm not going to offer you anything. I'm not going to change much. But that guy's an even bigger psychopath. What are you going to do? That's what Joe Biden said to that person of color who was concerned for their loved ones, who was concerned for their community, who was concerned about what's happening with immigration, as we all are and should be. And Joe Biden told them, go pound sand. Trump's even worse. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then when he was asked about healthcare, he didn't have an answer for that either. So he's like, it sounds like you want to vote for Bernie. Go ahead, vote for Bernie. The establishment's going to try to stop him. I'm not going to do anything for your healthcare, but screw you. You're stuck. That could be Joe Biden's campaign slogan, by the way. Screw you, you're stuck. I'm jet lag personified. Joe Biden. So that guy cannot coast on name recognition alone. But meanwhile, we have this Bernie Blackout. And even PBS is participating. You think NPR is much better? They're not. They've declined significantly in recent years. So has PBS. Why? Because they're taking more and more private funding and they're doing the will of their donors. They're doing the will of their advertisers. We don't have a media structure in the United States. I'll repeat that. We don't have a media structure in the United States. We just have a corporate giveaway. It's not a media structure. We have no oversight, none, of news and information. That's disgusting. A democratic experiment can't work in a media structure like that. That's why shows like this exist. Do you think in any healthy, functioning democracy, people would choose to get their news from a comedian streaming in his living room who talks to a cat? An entertainment show, that's fine. But do you think anybody would choose to get their news that way if we actually had a real media structure? They would for entertainment purposes. They would to maybe just get a jumping off point, and that's fine. But it's like, you can get more out of a comedian talking to a webcam in his living room than you can from the corporate media. And that's disturbing. That's very disturbing. So there you go. PBS knocking it out of the park. Tim, thank you for sharing that. Or wait, no, I'm sorry. RF Hartwell, thank you for sharing that.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our